Hello there and welcome back to some more Grand Theft Auto 3. Today we continue on the Let's Play. This is episode 10. In today's episode, we're dealing with the worst thing in the history of the world ever. It's time to finally tackle Paramedic. The most infamous side mission in the GTA 3D era because it's known widely to be absolutely bloody awful. And GTA 3 does a very good job of keeping in that tradition. So, what is Paramedic? Well, essentially what it is you're driving around in an ambulance and you pick people up and take them to the hospital. You know, they're injured, they need to go to a hospital. Makes sense, it's what paramedics do. Now, there's a couple of things that makes this particular side mission really awful. The first one is, well, the simple fact that you need to do everything in a row. This is not taxi driver, vigilante, firefighter, none of those. You have to do everything in a row, and you have to do all 12 levels in a row. In case you're wondering, there's 12 levels of difficulty in this. You have to go through 12 levels. Essentially, each level, a new patient is added. So you can see now that we're on level 2, we've got one patient all the way up there in the St. Mark's area, and then there's another one probably around the Chinatown area. Level 3, 3 patients, level 4, 4 patients, you get the gist. Yeah, but anyways, you have to do all of this in a row. You have to get to level 12 in one go. It's not just a start, stop, resume thing. You can't just get in an ambulance, fail it at level 6, and then get in an ambulance and start at level 6. Can't do that, which is particularly awful. So essentially means you need to drive the ambulance around for about 35 minutes. However, it gets worse than that. The ambulance, you'll probably notice, is an emergency vehicle. And an emergency vehicle cannot be repaired at pay and spray, so you need to keep the ambulance in good condition. So you need to use one ambulance for the entire thing. As soon as you exit the ambulance, you fail the mission, so you can't get a replacement ambulance. You need to keep your ambulance in good condition. And that's a bit of an issue because the ambulance doesn't really drive very well. And by very well I mean it's awful. It's very top heavy, it's very easy to flip. And around Portland, which is the only place you can do this, because again you can only use one ambulance and you can't have it repaired, what that means is that if you are doing this in the late game and have, you know, gangs coming after you and stuff, they'll shoot the ambulance and destroy it. Usually I'd say that's not really much of an issue. You know, a little bit of pistol fire here and there doesn't really hit the vehicles all that much, but in something where you literally need to keep the ambulance alive for 35 minutes, when it's not always already a good car and it's not a particularly strong vehicle, yeah, you really do not want that in your life. So I recommend doing it immediately. And the other issue is Portland is crap for this, because Portland is very hilly and a lot of the shortcuts involve hills, and how do you get a vehicle to flip over easy? You go for hills and inclines. Yeah, it's terrible. So that's the ambulance side covered, that's the in a row thing covered, the fact that you can't repair it covered. Is there anything more bad about this? Yes, the time limit's awful. The time limit is really very strict, and it gets worse each level. Like the first... Essentially, I count the levels in stages of 3, so for example, you know, stage 3 you only need one ambulance trip because you can only transport 3 people in an ambulance at a time. So essentially you have to transport them 3 people and then drop them off, and then you can get another 3 people and drop them off. So I say it's in stages. Essentially it's like 4 rounds. And the problem is the last level of the last round, which is, for example, you know, 6 people on level 6, the time limit becomes very strict indeed. And it's just awful. And unlike in the other GTA games, where essentially you get bonus time every time you drop one of your patients off, in this game you don't get that. You only get that once at the first bit, and then you don't get any more bonuses. You get a little bit of a bonus for picking up a passenger, but you get no bonus for dropping them off. So you really need to pay attention to the time limit. You need to really know the map. Again, as I mentioned in the Taxi Driver episode, Taxi Driver is a great way to learn the map. You really need to know Portland like the back of your hand to do this effectively. You need to know the shortcuts, you need to know the nooks and crannies, you need to know when a square pops up on your map what direction it's in, and, you know, sort of how you get to that direction. You gotta remember this game doesn't have a full open up map as well. You literally just only get the little mini map, you don't get anything else, so It is very, very challenging indeed. Again, I highly recommend knowing Portland like the back of your hand. You need to. Desperately. One saving grace is, at least when the pedestrians start doing the animations to get into the rear doors, they will just get in. There's no... You don't have to worry about them falling out or anything like that, as I think they would do in the late games. Obviously, the front door, as usual, if you drive off, they'll fall out, but the rear doors they can just get into at any point, so that's kind of nice, but that's really the only saving grace of this. It's just awful. It really is just absolutely awful. I'm sure I can think of worse things. Oh, there's no radio. So, and the sirens are quite useful. You sort of need the sirens to let traffic get out your way, or occasionally get in your way, but usually it's effective to leave them on, which means you get to hear this death wail for 35 minutes. And if that doesn't send you insane, the fact that you can fail the mission for stupid reasons will. For example, if you kill a patient, you fail. You just fail. So if you accidentally run them over, you fail. One thing worth to note is also colliding with stuff, you'll reduce the time that you get. So I believe you get 1 second less every time you do it. The hilarious thing with this as well is it lures you into a false sense of security. The first 6 levels aren't too bad. It's everything that comes after that where it gets awful, and you really need to start figuring out map strategy and all the rest of it. It's just terrible. It really is. I mean, like I said, you've got to know vehicle control, you've got to know the map very well, you've got to know what you're doing to pull Paramedic off. Otherwise, it will bite you in the arse. And be prepared to rage. Be prepared to fail a few times at this. Because there is no way in God's green earth you could do this first time round. You might be able to if you're really lucky. But it will take a couple of tries. It will take practice to do this. I think it took... Thankfully, it wasn't quite as bad as I expected it to be. Admittedly, I did fail this on like level 10 on stream, which pissed me off to no end. Well, you know, past that, it's not too bad. You know, it wasn't too bad. A couple of failed attempts that didn't really matter, and then, yeah. So, it's just a case of trial and error, and that's the only real way you can do this. It is just all about map strategy, keeping the ambulance alive, maybe a little bit of cheating. I didn't need to, thankfully. Use the health cheat, but always keep the health cheat in the back of your mind, because trust me, it is worth remembering its existence, because that's really the only way you can repair the ambulance. Another thing to bear in mind, if you don't mind cheating, if you want to use the health cheat and actually take the doors and all the doors off the ambulance, that can help as well. You can get the patients to come in a little bit quicker. I almost got killed by that mule. That can just happen occasionally as well. You need to accept the fact that occasionally traffic cars can just kill you. But yeah, the one thing to bear in mind is if you want to smash the doors off the vehicle, they'll fall off eventually anyway after a while, but if you want to do it straight away and use the health cheat to repair the ambulance to full health and just have the doors come off, that's not a bad idea. It can actually help significantly to do that, because it means patient entry time is a little bit quicker. You don't really need to worry about stuff like that until the later levels though. But yeah, it is just really weird how some levels like this, for example, this is easy. I have a ridiculous amount of time left on the clock, 1.5 minutes, and then other times it's really very, very strict. Also, another thing worth mentioning is, unlike in other GTA games where you do this, the time doesn't carry over. You do not get to keep the time that you earned in the previous round, so yeah, it's just, it's the hilarious thing with Paramedic, is it's just, you mention one thing and how bad it is, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse, and then it gets even worse. It's just, it's the worst side mission in all of GTA, and GTA 3's version is particularly difficult. You know, I mean, past this point when gangs don't, I can't imagine doing. Also, by the way, I got incredibly worried by this. Yeah, I had to try and. Yeah, I was almost about to throw my controller through a window if that would fail, and that was only after the 10 minutes. Can you imagine if that happened on like level 11? Yeah, that can just happen occasionally. The AI just occasionally derps out, and Paramedic can sometimes be out of your control, and it sucks, but I can't imagine doing this with a gang shooting you. As I said, this is one of those side missions you have no choice. You're doing this at the start of the game, or you're just going to have to accept the fact you can't do 100% completion. It's just point blank. Unless you want to use the health cheat, there's no way you can do this past the first couple of missions in the game. Because again, even pistol fire, sure it doesn't really matter, but after 35 minutes of being shot at by pistols, guess what, the vehicle's going to go boom boom. And that's just the way it goes. Especially when you're competing against stuff like Uzis and shotguns, it'll just be even worse. So this is, if you've ever wondered why I started doing some of the side jobs right at the start of the game, this is exactly why. One thing you could potentially do, and I've been sort of asked questions about this and so on and so forth, because of how awful Portland is for working with the ambulance, a lot of people have said, why don't you use one of the glitches to move over to Staunton or Shoreside Vale before you do this? First of all, Shoreside Vale is even worse for this. Shoreside Vale is an atrocious place to navigate. If you think Portland's bad, try Shoreside Vale. It's awful to navigate, but then again, Shoreside is smaller, but even still I wouldn't do it there. Staunton seems like the best place to do it just because it's the flattest place in the game. It is the longest, but the ambulance can actually deal with straight line speed. The problem with that is the hospital is in a cartel stronghold, and the cartel will shoot at you right out the gate. You know, the cartel hate you right from the start of the game, so you do have to deal with pistol fire at the ambulance. So really, the only place you can do it is Portland, and it's just awful. I mean, one saving grace is you do get a decent amount of money from doing it, but compared to all the disadvantages of doing Paramedic, it's a lose situation, Paramedic. It's just, I hate it. I really do hate the Paramedic side mission, but as I said, the funny thing is, you know, in Vice City it's easier because the gangs don't shoot at you on sight and the map's a lot flatter. In San Andreas, if you want to do this, you can do it at Angel Pine, which is a really small area in the map. You can get it done in about 20 minutes, and it's a hell of a lot easier. Liberty City Stories, I believe it might actually be about as difficult as in this game, apart from on mobile, where you can only do 9 levels of it, so that's better. And then in Vice City Stories there's actually checkpoints, so this is actually the worst Paramedic in the 3D era. But I will say, at least it is quite the achievement if you manage to get this done. Props to you if you can finish Paramedic. Only true men beat Paramedics. Is one of the great things, you know. The Mile High Club from Call of Duty 4 on Veteran is extremely difficult, and Paramedic is probably about that in terms of your overall endurance and not going absolutely insane, especially because of that siren. But I will say, after doing this, you will want to murder every ambulance you see in game. Oh, that's another thing as well. You have to transport the patients to the hospitals anyway. You just get the ambulance from the hospitals. Don't bother with trying to spawn it in through killing pedestrians and stuff. You want the ambulance in the absolute most mint condition you can get. I guess you could start it halfway around the map and be closer to the patients, but really that would only save you in level 1, and level 1's easy as piss anyway. So yeah, it's just a case of it's much easier to just start it from the ambulance's spawn point, which is at the hospitals, and that's where I'd recommend starting it from. Other than that, there's not really many more tips I can give you other than this is just blind luck, and you do have to accept the fact that you are going to fail it a few times. There is going to be issues. Also worth pointing out, if I haven't already, is much like pretty much every other side mission in the game, you can attract police attention while doing this. In fairness, you know, compared to some of the other side missions, it's not quite as likely. You shouldn't really be hitting pedestrians. Not a lot of the shortcuts important involve pedestrians. Many. And you don't particularly want to hit pedestrians anyway, because guess what, pedestrians can indeed hurt your vehicle, so I wouldn't particularly recommend running them over, especially the fatter ones. But yeah, just something to bear in mind. You can get police attention. Try to avoid hitting police cars and stuff like that, but you should be trying to avoid hitting literally anything. It is just a case of learning how to drive an awful vehicle around an awfully laid out place with awful AI and silly restrictions, and that's Paramedic. That is just Paramedic, and there's a reason I'm not speeding this up. Usually, you know, with Taxi Driver I sped it up, but with this I feel like people probably can take as much advice from this as possible. One thing to bear in mind, and I by no means I would say like, oh, I am the model, I am the person you should be watching for tips on this. But in these later levels, if you struggle with this, pay very close attention to the way I'm strategizing about the way I go around the map. You might see me in these sections. I often go towards Trenton and the docks area before I go upper towards, you know, St. Mark's and Hepburn Heights, because the docks, it's a little bit harder to navigate around, and having the time bonus that you get from dropping off the first few passengers can help. So I would actually suggest at the start of a new round going for the passengers that are the furthest away or in the most difficult to reach places, so you can get that time bonus when you take them to the hospital, and that can help you out on the later people. I definitely, in much a simpler way as, say, the mission Red Baron from GTA San Andreas works, it's often much better to go for the people who are further away than those that are closer to you. And again, just to learn how to navigate around Trenton especially, there's a lot of shortcuts, a lot of flat ground around there, which is very nice compared to the way you have to navigate certain other places. But yeah, you just sort of pay attention to map strategy and so on and so forth. And again, I hate to say it, it's trial and error, I'm afraid. You are going to have quite a few times. You've got to probably spend a good couple of hours attempting Paramedic over and over and over again. The siren will drive you insane. I definitely recommend getting some entertainment to watch while doing this, you know, whatever you're into. Probably a podcast so you can focus most of your attention. You'll see here as well, I saw 3 people in that sort of one congregated area. I left those for last because they are going to give me a time bonus each time I pick one of those up, and time might be something I'm hurting for later on. But as you can see, sometimes they do that as well, which is weird, but don't worry too much about that. They can't fall out the ambulance even though they're like halfway protruding through the air. They can't fall out the ambulance, which is a bonus. But other than that, there's not really much more I can say other than good luck, you're gonna need it. I can talk a little bit about the rewards though, because you'll probably end up claiming the rewards from this before you actually complete level 12. So for reaching 35 patients saved during the Paramedic side mission, you get a health pickup at your hideout, which is very helpful. Indeed, it's actually, I would actually, even if you're not going for 100% completion, reaching 35 patients saved isn't that difficult, and you know, getting that health pickup is quite useful. For saving 70 patients, which I believe would take you somewhere around level 12, so you could actually get him to overlap there. I didn't. I actually got 35 patients saved and 70 patients saved before this. I actually failed this at level 10 on stream, and the people who were there can attest to the fact I was not a particularly happy chappy when that happened. But reaching 70 patients saved will give you an adrenaline pill at your hideout, which isn't really useful at all, but it's there. And finally, reaching full level 12 will give you infinite sprints, which is very, very, very useful indeed. You know, just in general for stuff like rampages, having level 12 sprint can be very useful for running around with stuff like Uzis, and just in general, it's a very nice feature to have. It's sort of a nice convenience, less irritating feature, but is it worth 12 levels of Paramedic? Well, maybe not, because my god. To be fair, if I wasn't doing a 100% playthrough, I would have ignored the existence of this bit. Also worth mentioning is they take forever to get back up as well once they have fallen over, so bear that in mind. But as you can see, sort of on this final level, the time bonuses you get for picking up the pedestrians just gets worse and worse. It's utterly awful. You know, 26 seconds, you'll get 26 seconds for dropping off the first passenger only, bear in mind. And then you have to do it all over again. This is basically Taxi on steroids. This is Taxi Driver, but, you know, everything you hate about Taxi Driver combined with just Satan, just pissing on Taxi Driver. Satan Driver, that's really what they should call this. But it's just awful. I can't speak about how awful it is, but as I said, I'm not going to go ahead and skip any of this because it is kind of vital to know. You'll also notice the fact that these later rounds do take forever. I'm going to take a sip of water quickly while I do this. This is a long commentary session. I've of course pre-recorded this, as I have done with pretty much all of the side mission stuff, just to make things a little bit easier. The side missions are actually easier to fail than the main missions, believe it or not. I'm going to take a sip of water. It's not very good water, to be honest with you. Well, it's alright. It's bottled spring water. Is it spring water? Yes. What does it say on the thing? An exceptional spring water drawn beneath the Yorkshire Pennines. Bottled source. Shepley Spring Limited in Uddlesfield. HD80PQ UK. For best before date, see bottleneck. Water has a best before date. See bottleneck. It's not even on the bottleneck, is it? I'm trying to tell if it's on the bottleneck or not right now. I don't see it. Oh, there it is. March 2021. Interesting. Store in a cool place out of direct sunlight. Once open, keep refrigerated and consumed within 3 days. www.icevalley.co.uk. What does it say? 25% recycled plastic. Jesus, we are living in the modern age of 2019 with Ice Valley spring water. It's alright, you know, I mean, some of the Tesco, it's the best out of the Tesco waters. I won't usually be drinking water, but I find myself taking water to bed more lately. I had a bit of an ill spell in January, I think it was. And usually I go to bed with like a glass of Diet Coke or something like that, because it can help clear my throat in the morning. But I found myself using water more these days, just to keep myself hydrated. And it also helps to wash down the pills I have to take in the morning. Yeah, it's not bad stuff. I won't pay for it, but then again, I don't pay for it. Someone else does, and I just steal it, so it's alright, innit? I guess it's better than tap water. Tap water is colder. The tap water is quite nice around here, actually, to be honest with you. One of the advantages of living around here, I guess, is the tap water's okay. Well, even still, it's... Anyways, where were we? Oh yeah, Paramedic's still going on. I believe this is... what are we getting on to? Level 10. So yeah, the final 3 levels of this take about 15 minutes. It's insane how long this side mission goes on for, which is why I'm having to speak about spring water. Other than that, not really much to talk about. I can't really talk about what's going on in the YouTube landscape or anything at the moment, considering this is going to be uploaded in about a month's time. In fact, technically it should be the 10th of April when you see this. I'm not sure if that's going to be true or not, but may as well throw the date out there. I'll guarantee that I chuck it out or make me look like an idiot. One or two. Good. It's 2 AM at the moment on the 13th of March 2019 as I record this. I do pre-record quite a lot of stuff these days. It's actually a better way of doing it. Always being ahead of yourself. At the same time, it does mean that once you sort of end up not being ahead of yourself, you feel a bit weird. But, you know, it is just what it is. Other than that, not really much to speak about. I'm enjoying GTA 3 at the moment, though. This has been a pretty good Let's Play, apart from this episode, which is just trash. But at the same time, this episode is kind of necessary because it's Paramedic, the worst thing in the world. But yeah, I hope you've been enjoying the Let's Play so far. Please do let me know your thoughts on it so far in the comment section. I actually think this has been one of the better solo LPs I've ever done. At the moment, I don't know, that could very much change once we reach Daunton Island. I haven't recorded any of that yet. I'm probably going to start working away on the side missions, packages, stuff like that, over the next couple of days. Maybe on Thursday I'll start working on that, and then we'll see where we end up. But, I mean, the funny thing is, if you actually look at the breakdown to the game, Daunton Island is... I mean, Portland's the main big chunk of the game. I mean, the first 15 episodes of this are taking place in Portland. And right now I've got this worked out to be 39 episodes long. Although that could change. Could change very much indeed. Don't want to move that around or not. Anyways, yeah, I've got a full list here, which basically shows the entire game, what's breakdowns and stuff. I've even got names for some of the episodes. That might have been why the names are so good. I don't know if you've noticed that. If you like the names, do let me know. I do try to put some pretty good emphasis on titling, actually. Titling is one thing I both enjoy and despise, because titling, sometimes it's an absolute nightmare. You know, trying to think of stuff, and then other times you'll just have a day where you just have so many title names, and that's what I did. That's why I decided to write them down. I've actually got quite a few of these episodes titled out. I still need to think of a name for the Rampage episode, but I've got an idea for that actually. Actually, I've got a great name for that. Hold on, let me type that in right now. Perfect. What else is on here? Need a name for that and that. I'll think of those at some point. Anyways, what's going on? I believe this is coming towards the end of level 10 of the paramedic stuff. There's a guy who rushes around the back, or is this level 11? It's one of the two. I think it's level 10. I don't think I'm quite that lucky yet. We're not that far away from this at the moment, but yeah, there we go. As we rush once again through Hepburn Heights and the red light districts to try and take the people to the medical care which they deserve, and hopefully they die on the operating table for asking us to be a paramedic. What would it be like being a real life paramedic? I can imagine not very good these days. You probably just get shouted at by drunk people for trying to save their lives, which is a bit bollocks really, isn't it? Also level 11, there you go. Apparently I decided to do 2 passengers in one trip. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. Really depends on what your time limit is, but you can see here the time limit. It's like 40 seconds to do this. I think this is when I did get a little bit shaky, a little bit paranoid, because I've never actually done this in GTA 3 before. Never completed it anyway, so doing it now feels weird. There's an Idaho randomly driving into a steel or concrete post for some reason. I don't know. I decided to get these guys in Chinatown first, just because the time limit was quite strict. I was trying to get the people who are closest to me first, which seemed to have gone quite well. I don't know if I picked this guy up. It looks like I'm going to, yes. There you go. So again, it's just, I can't really explain the map strategy too much other than just saying go for whatever feels like it's going to be the most advantageous at the time. But if you follow relatively my strategy, I mean, at the end of the day they spawn in roughly the same places each time, so I guess you can kind of use this as like a guide. Don't use it as a concrete guide by any stretch of imagination. Yeah, I'm not trying to say this is where everyone's going to spawn immediately, but it's a pretty good, you know what I mean, like, they're not usually too, what's the word I'm looking for, too random with their spawning. They usually have relatively set places pretty close to where these guys are getting picked up from. So apparently I've decided not to go for that guy at the back yet, unless I'm going to work my way around to him. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing at the moment. So I see 3 congregated there, decided to leave. Oh, I'm going for the guy in St. Mark's. I'm going to rush around there and then pick up them 2 for a time bonus. Yeah, okay, I know what I'm doing now. The guys in St. Mark's you do have to watch out for. You need to bear in mind that when you're coming down that hill, your braking distance is slightly impaired because the ambulance will be moving slightly faster. I do recommend utilising the handbrake a lot in this, because if you use the regular brake occasionally that can dip into reverse, and you really do not want to crush one of the people under your wheels, because you've already got enough things working against you without yourself working against you. So yeah, using the handbrake, that's actually a useful piece of advice I've come up with 30 minutes into this. Hallelujah. But yeah, it's just essentially the way to do it. I believe I'm going to circle back around, and that's the reason I go for these guys at the docks. There was 2 of them. I can't really see because of the squares, but they're both in a line. As you can see, timer is going a little bit finicky. I think I was trying to build as much time as possible before I did that final run to Hepburn Heights, trying not to get this. You'll see me sort of sway around occasionally if I see an AI car near one of the patients. That's to avoid the issue from earlier where a taxi ran over one of my patients. I'm sort of trying to sway from side to side because they do seem to, whichever side you look like you're going on is which side the AI will try and dodge on. The AI have three behaviours. They'll either dive left, dive right, or stop. Stop is what they're going to do if they're in the oncoming lane usually, and if they're in your lane they're going to go for whatever section the AI seems to think you're coming from. So for example, I'm going up the right here, so they seems to be pulling for the left. That mule, I've got no idea what it's going to do. They are a little bit random, but if you see sort of a car heading towards one of your patients, the best thing to do is dive to the other side of it and it will move the other way around, if that makes sense. I do recommend trying to learn this shortcut as well, because the sort of shortcut up towards the head radio car park is incredibly useful. It's incredibly terrifying though, because of the way the ambulance is. It's very top heavy. Also worth pointing out is other emergency vehicles will not move out of your way, so bear that in mind. They will be assholes, but thankfully I get a decent amount of time bonus from this one, just from the sake that these guys are pretty close together. I believe, yeah, sometimes they also run into walls. They're a little bit stupid. They do the usual GTA thing where as soon as you get into their sort of cone, they'll start running towards you. So if they start running into a wall or something, your best bet is to just sort of go around, evade, and hope they work it out. They usually do, but then again, this is GTA AI. The one thing I will say at least is the risk of death during this isn't too bad, so it's a positive, I guess. Anyways, we finally get to the fabled level 12. I actually think level 12 isn't too bad. It's usually the intermediate levels that I have an issue with. You know, 3, 6, 9 and 12 aren't actually too bad. Time-wise, they can be a little bit of a nuisance. But because you have so many people to pick up, sure, you don't get too much in the way of time bonus for actually picking them up. But you do okay. As you can see, I believe I paused the game here to look at something. Not quite sure what I was looking at. I think I was trying to find a map or something. I remembered, oh yeah, the game doesn't have a map. But decided to pick up these guys in Harwood, leave that person there because I believe there's a couple of people in Chinatown I can go ahead and try and get this taxi out of my way. As you can see, my ambulance is also starting to smoke at this point, so I became a little bit more aware of the fact damage was being caused. Bear in mind, you know, cars in GTA 3, they do seem to smoke quicker than they do in previous or in later GTA games. You know, in the Vice Cities and San Andreas and stuff, white smoke usually means your cars are like, you know, 50-60% damage. Whereas in this game it seems to trigger much earlier. The cars seem to be more fragile, so. But the one advantage of level 12 is you occasionally get situations like this where the guys just spawn all around each other. And it's nice when they do that because you get a nice little time bonus there. You can see we're up to almost 2 minutes, so I can, you know, not waste time and go back and get this guy from Harwood. Again, there's no point on these later levels where you need to get 3 people in your ambulance. There is absolutely no point in wasting time and dropping the guys off and then coming back to get this one guy, because you do not get a time bonus. You only get a time bonus for the first passengers you drop off, so, you know, never prematurely take people. If you're on, say, level 12, don't take 2 people in your ambulance to the hospital. You know, drive past the hospital and pick up another person and then take them back, just because it's not worth doing. It's just a waste of time and you don't want that. Apparently I parked that van in a pretty good place. I failed this, so that's why I've got a fish van there and it hasn't despawned, because this game allows you to have 2 vehicles, I believe, before it despawns one of them. But apparently it was actually quite useful for making sure AI cars didn't block the actual entrance to the hospital. I do recommend using that sort of south-facing entrance over using the north-facing entrance, because the ambulance's roof can snag on the pillars surrounding that one, which can be a bit of an issue, so just bear that in mind as well. But yeah, it's just a case of figuring out your own strategy for this. You know, you might even want to potentially use 2 cars to block the entire road. I think that's a bit extreme. I don't think that's really worth doing as well, but you can do that if you feel the need to. But yeah, this entrance is quite tight to go around. You have to do a very slow entrance into there, because as much as, you know, snagging the ambulance on those metal rods once isn't really going to cause that much issue, doing it a few times over, that really is going to hurt you at the end of the day. So you don't want to hurt yourself, you want to do well, because the last thing you need to do during this is make it more painful for yourself. But yeah, this area especially can be a bit of a bitch, just because everything's on such sharp inclines, and the ambulance really does not like sharp inclines, as it turns out. So, anyways, pick these guys up. As you can see, I always leave people in Hepburn Heights to last. Not quite sure why I did that. I haven't got anything against Hepburn Heights, but that's the way I did it. I was thinking you could take it the head radio shortcut, but I decided it'd actually just be probably about the same amount of pace and a lot safer to do that. Thankfully, that taxi did not run the person over. Again, as I said, when they're sort of starting to get into the rear doors, you can't do anything wrong, so you can reverse. I try not to do it just because later GTA games cloud mines things, but you can get away with doing that, so it is worth bearing in mind. As you can see, you know, I'm driving full speed ahead. I got this guy, and now all we need to do is make it to the hospital. I've got 2 minutes to go, thankfully, and I was feeling pretty good about myself, but you can see I was being very, very cautious, because knowing my luck, I'd roll the ambulance at the last minute or something like that. But after trying to get past this taxi that apparently didn't know what he was doing, taxis seem to be an issue, kill a pimp, and wait for it, 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 and there we go. My god. So you get a trophy if you play it on PS4, and yeah, you will now never get tired while sprinting. It's glorious, isn't it? So as you can see, I left the ambulance and immediately went to go sprint for joy. Yeah, that's finally over. It is a nightmare. It is not fun. It is probably one of the hardest things you'll have to deal with in this game on your road to 100% completion. But once it's done, you do just feel what a feeling and run like a mentalist, because you're that happy. Run all the way to your safe house. Having a limited sprint in this game is very useful, just like it is in Vice City as well, because the characters are actually very, very quick from sprinting. In fact, I'd like to almost say they're quicker than some of the slower cars in the game, so yeah, definitely something that is worth having, even to get you out of pickle. You know, if you roll a car in a desolate area, is something that's very useful. But I sprint all the way here to the hideout, and as you can see, there is the health and adrenaline pickups for doing 35 and 70 patients respectively. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this slightly higgledy-piggledy episode where I showed you how to do Paramedic. Join us next time for the much less egregious firefighter side mission, and yeah, until then, a farewell. 'Cause lately